Did our ancestors survive on oats and roots, proving the carnivore diet is just a fad? Registered nutritionist Adam McDonald has a video on his channel where he calls the carnivore diet a fairy tale.
The idea that animal produce only diet is something that primal humans used to do or follow, or that it's better for your health than a balanced diet, is simply nothing more than a fairy tale rhetoric.
He claims that because anthropologists found oat processing 30,000 years ago, that proves our ancestors ate plenty of plants. But to make that claim, he had to ignore the fact that in 2021, there is a study from Tel Aviv University showing that we were apex predators for over 2 million years. Today, we are fact-checking Adam's claims and showing you the science that they're not telling you. So let's jump into it.
We need to go back to first principles, eating the way our Paleolithic ancestors did. At least that's what the supporters of the carnivore diet will lead you to believe. But is this just a...
It shows Liver King, who actually took in steroids. Liver King?
Yes, I've done steroids. And yes, I'm on steroids, monitored and managed by a trained hormone clinician.
And also, he was taking like a lot of stuff like maple syrup. That's not really a carnivore diet that the Liver King was following. It was more of like an animal-based diet.
And then we'll have a bowl of carbs, probably some tubers or some rice, but today it's probably going to be tubers. This is dinner.
A group of researchers from Harvard University asked the question, how does an animal-based diet affect the gut compared to a plant-based diet? The participants in this study followed a diet that was consistent with what we call now the carnivore diet, including only cheese, meat, and eggs for 5 days. They then had a 1-month washout period where they consumed their normal balanced diet, followed by 5 more days of a plant-based diet consisting of grains, legumes, fruits, and vegetables. Interestingly, after only day 2, the animal-based diet resulted in significant shifts in gut bacterial diversity, which remained until the participants went back to their old way of eating.
Adam cites a study about gut health, okay? But if you look closely at it, the Harvard study showing that when people switch to an animal-only diet, their gut shifts and short-chain fatty acids like butyrate go down. Sounds terrifying. But when you look deep into it and look at it properly, the study, it only lasted 5 days. A carnivore diet for 5 days. Judging the effects of a long-term diet over just 5 days, a transition phase, isn't good. It's biological nonsense. It's like going to the gym, and then when you go to the gym for the first time, then you come back and say, oh, I'm sore after being in the gym. Like you wake up sore for 5 days, and then you say, oh, going to the gym is bad because I woke up sore from going to the gym. That's what it's like claiming. There's no transition phase. So if you're changing your fuel source, you're eating like, let's say, lots of carbs, and then you go and you try a carnivore diet for 5 days, you mightn't get good results because you're doing it for 5 days. Basing the long-term effects of a diet on a study that they looked at when they run the carnivore diet for just 5 days isn't good. So that's very poor science. It's not going to tell you anything.
They also found that there was a significant reduction in the amount of postbiotics, such as short-chain fatty acids, in those following a carnivore diet compared to the plant-based diet. This makes a lot of sense since short-chain fatty acids are the gases that result from the breakdown of fiber in your intestines, such as acetate, butyrate, and propionate. These all play important roles in appetite regulation, intestinal barrier function, metabolic health, lipid metabolism, immune function, and colorectal cancer protection.
Adam wants to eat fiber and plant foods with fiber, but we don't have the enzyme for breaking down plant cellulose. We haven't got cellulase. We have to outsource it to bacteria in our colon that ferment it. Ferments the rotten plant matter into gas, bloating, etc. in a small amount of short-chain fatty acids, okay? When you eat fatty meat, okay, and butter, etc., they've got beta-hydroxybutyrate. So he's talking about like butyrate and all, okay? These short-chain fatty acids. But you get butyrate straight from butter. And beta-hydroxybutyrate isn't just local in a focal part of the small intestine. It's used systemically. So in the brain, in the heart, etc. And like we talked about before, okay, there's a study in 2012 where there's 41 people that they ameliorated their idiopathic constipation from cutting out fiber, from having zero fiber.
Heart health, or more specifically cardiovascular health, isn't something that the carnivorous primals typically say improves by only eating animal produce, but I've never heard them talk about the potential dangers. It's not the food itself per se, but the high saturated fat content that the carnivore diet often contains.
So he's saying about the high saturated fat, that saturated fat is bad, but beef isn't 100% saturated fat. There's more monounsaturated fat in red meat than saturated fat. The primary fat in a ribeye, for example, is oleic acids, which is the heart-healthy the one that's good in olive oil.
Ansel Keys found that in the 1950s, saturated fat increased blood cholesterol levels by twice the amount as polyunsaturated fats lowered cholesterol levels. Keys stated that the most significant dietary change that someone can make to improve their heart health is to improve their PS ratio. In other words, the level of polyunsaturated fat compared to saturated fat in your diet. This means eating more items such as nuts, seeds, and oily fish, and limiting foods like fatty red meat and butter.
Ansel Keys had actually data for 22 countries, but he ignored that and focused on just the 7 that fitted his hypothesis. He's left out countries like France and Switzerland who ate a lot of saturated fat, so picked 7 out of the 22 countries. It's known as the French paradox, but really there's no paradox, it's just bad science.
Phytonutrients, which are chemicals that give plants their distinct colours, tastes and aromas, although non-essential, can have profound health and well-being benefits.
So like polyphenols like tannins and chlorogenic acid, etc. can bind to nutrients. Like the polyphenols in for tea, coffee, etc. can bind to iron and block the absorption by like 60 to 90%. Not only iron, they block the absorption of his zinc, calcium, etc. So people say they're like antioxidants by polyphenols, but they're actually pro-oxidants and block absorption of nutrients. You aren't eating a superfood, you're actually eating a nutrient blocker.
It is important to remember that we don't consume nutrients in isolation. We don't consume oxalates or lectins by themselves. We consume them packaged in spinach, peas, or similar. And there's no evidence that foods containing these nutrients are themselves going to be harmful for your health when prepared properly.
He tries to downplay like things like oxalates and lectins under a microscope. Spinach, for example, okay, that's loaded with raphides, these needle-like spears of calcium oxalate. That's what these raphides are like. They evolved to puncture anything that eats it, basically, the gut lining or anything that tries to eat it. So you just have to ask Liam Hemsworth, for example, who loaded up on spinach smoothies every day and ended up in hospital with a kidney stone, a calcium oxalate kidney stone. Kelly Clarkson, she was eating a standard balanced diet, but suffered from a severe autoimmune thyroid condition for years. How did she heal from that? By strictly eliminating lectins. There's a big study done on zinc absorption, and when people ate oysters with black beans, it blocked the absorption of some of the zinc in the oysters, because that's the anti-nutrient blocking it in the black beans. And when they ate the oysters then with corn tortillas, it actually blocked even more of the zinc in the oysters, and it was almost to zero, the zinc. So you're basically flushing nutrients down the drain because the phytates in the plant foods, the black beans, and especially the corn tortillas.
High cholesterol in the diet can contribute to cardiovascular disease over the long term. It really takes some major mental gymnastics and avoidance of science to believe.
Massive 2020 review published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology concluded there is no robust evidence that limiting saturated fat prevents heart disease. The foundational lie of the food pyramid was bought and paid for. Because in the 1960s, 3 Harvard professors were paid off to falsify studies that actually showed that sugar was the enemy and not fat. Trade group called Sugar Research Foundation paid these 3 Harvard professors modern equivalent of $50,000 to downplay the science linking sugar to heart disease and instead pointed the finger at saturated fat. One of those 3 scientists that was paid off was Mark Hegsted. And guess what happened 10 years later? In 1977, Mark Hegsted became the chairman of the USDA guidelines. So basically the foundational lie of the food pyramid was bought and paid for.
This meta-analysis comparing the ketogenic diet, which is essentially what the carnivore diet is, to a low-fat diet found that there were similar effects on weight loss. However, the ketogenic diet did increase LDL cholesterol.
He talks about like LDL cholesterol. LDL isn't cholesterol. It's a lipoprotein that carries cholesterol. Cholesterol is a vital molecule because fat and water don't mix. It needs a both. So LDL stands for low density lipoprotein. It's just the protein that carries the cargo. If you eat a high carb oxidized oils and all, those boats are going to be oxidized. Those boats are going to be damaged. But when you eat saturated fat, they become large and fluffy, those LDL particles. When it comes to blaming red meat for heart disease, Adam relies on weak observational epidemiology. But the irony is that Adam actually knows that observational science is poor science. In fact, he made a whole video defending Coke Zero where he said that observational science is flawed.
But when people carry umbrellas, it's more likely that it's going to be raining, but the umbrellas don't cause it to rain. It's the rain that causes the umbrellas.
Exactly, Adam. Correlation does not equal causation. You're willing to put on a lab coat and use the umbrella analogy to defend drinking artificial chemicals. You correctly point out that people drinking this Diet Coke have other bad habits as well, which skews the data. Why does your logic disappear when you talk about meat? You completely ignore what they eat with the meat, the chips and the soda that they have and the burger bun that the meat comes on, but you completely ignore that. You can't use confounding variables to defend Coke Zero, but then use it against red meat. And then conveniently forget that they exist when you want to demonize red meat. Like, you're the one basically blaming the storm in your umbrella analogy. So if you have any comments, drop them below and make sure to like, share, comment and subscribe. And I'll say so.